Today on Fear and Greed, the federal government is set to mandate the acceptance of cash in essential services. Resolute Mining pays $250 million to enable its CEO to be released from Mali. And Royce pushes into space exploration. Plus, more on Prime Minister Anthony Albanese meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping and the incredible arrest of former radio announcer Alan Jones. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Tuesday, the 19th of November 2024. I'm Michael Thompson and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, cash, it seems, is not dead. In fact, it isn't being allowed to die, really, with Treasurer Jim Chalmers saying the government will mandate that some essential services keep accepting cash from customers.
Groceries and fuel providers, for example, the supermarkets, I'm sure, will have to pay cash if people want to use that form of payment. 1.5 million Australians still rely on cash. And Dr. Chalmers yesterday said the government wants to make it an ongoing feature of our economy, even as we modernise the payment system. About 94% of businesses still do accept cash. It was 99% a few years ago, so it is decreasing. Debit cards, according to the Reserve Bank, account for about 51% of payments nowadays. Credit cards are about 26%. Cash is 13%. And there's a grab bag of methods for the other 10%. Cheques, of course, is a big one there. Cheques, though, are being phased out, though that'll take a while. Banks have to accept them until 2029. Now, opposition finance spokesperson Jane Hume came out yesterday. She said that the idea may raise costs for business. I don't think that's actually the case because usually cash is the lowest cost method, particularly for small businesses. Debit cards are generally lower cost than credit cards, but not as cheap as cash. Normally, shop owners pay higher fees to accept credit cards because it's basically borrowing money from your card provider. That's where there are fees for that particular one. Anyway, the idea that cash will disappear, nada, it's hanging around.
I suppose there'll be some ongoing costs, though, won't there, in terms of the transporting of money, which is something that we've seen a lot about fairly recently with Armaguard Linfox.
Yeah.
With really a temporary situation having to be set up just to enable cash to still be transported around the country, because that is a fairly expensive process.
It sure is. And most of that cost falls on the big banks, the big retailers like the supermarket guys. So, yeah, that's a good point. That will still has to play out and they still need to get cash around the economy. But Jim Chalmers yesterday made it clear that's going to happen. So there has to be a solution for that one.
All right. Staying in politics, Sean, the federal opposition and Greens are set to join forces to vote down the government's plans to cap international student places at 270,000 from next year.
You don't really see the Greens and the federal opposition joining forces too much.
They're not the most likely of bedfellows, are they?
No. Anyway, the opposition and Greens are coming at this one from very, very different directions. So the coalition doesn't want the bill to go through because it doesn't go far enough. It wants much bigger reductions. Like it doesn't want a 270,000 cap for international students. It wants far fewer. Greens, well, they're just worried about job losses across the education sector. Arguably, they want more people coming into the economy. Labor has said it wants to cap new international students at 270,000 starting from January next year. The universities are certainly not happy because that's how they make a lot of their money, but they have been knocking back applications because they've reached their limit. Anyway, it looks like that legislation won't be passed because the coalition of the Greens won't support it.
And federal parliament is sitting this week. It's sitting next week as well, the final fortnight before the Christmas break, although Prime Minister Anthony Albanese isn't actually around for it much, is he?
Yeah, no, it takes a bit of sting out of proceedings. He won't be there this week. He's in Brazil at the G20 summit, of course. Yesterday, question time was mostly about energy policy and climate change, nuclear policy, that sort of thing. One remarkable thing yesterday, and it is remarkable, an unusual event maybe is a better way of putting it. During question time, Teal MP Monique Ryan was asked a question. You might think, why is that remarkable? Because during question time, Coalition and Labor politicians are asked questions, never the independents. It's allowed, but it never, ever happens. Anyway, yesterday she was asked about her private member's bill that aims to clean up politics. She did get to have a whack at the government. She said that integrity measures placed before the House, not just hers, but other independents as well, haven't been debated by this government, and she was quite critical of that.
Sean, a quick mention of today's interview. I reckon the interview that's coming up after the show today is one of the best that we have had on this show for a very long time. You're speaking with Liz Broderick from Elizabeth Broderick & Co.
Yes, so it's all about corporate culture. We have had some high-profile cases of, allegations, but potentially poor corporate culture from some large listed companies. We've seen it in mining, we've seen it in technology, we've seen it in media, and we ask Liz about that. We ask, why isn't corporate culture, why are we still having the conversation? You know, we were talking about this 15 years ago. Are we getting any better, and what more needs to be done? Liz, fantastic person, done more in this area than any other Australian, I would argue, and continues to be very passionate about it.
Yeah, of course, as the former Sex Discrimination Commissioner, I would say that she would be pretty much Australia's leading expert on all of this. So it is a great conversation. So please stick around for that one and have a listen. It's coming up after the show. We still have a fair bit to get through though, Sean. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was due to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping overnight at the G20 Leaders Summit in Brazil and call for more backbone from global leaders around conflicts in the Middle East and in Ukraine.
Mr. Albanese was expected to say that the conflicts are the key drivers of hunger, poverty, higher inflation, and higher energy prices. It's the third meeting between the two since relations began thawing. They are also likely to have discussed the threat posed by Donald Trump to free trade, according to the Fin Review. Of course, Mr. Trump has threatened 60% tariffs on Chinese goods, up to 20% on Australian goods. It is very interesting that over the past week at the APEC summit in G20, free trade is foremost in most leaders' minds about what needs to be discussed. The key irritant in the relationship between Australia and China, of course, is regional security. That's also likely to have been discussed.
The outgoing US ambassador to Australia, Caroline Kennedy, very famous name, called for calm over President-elect Donald Trump's picks for government positions. I can't believe that she's nearly finished here. It only seems like yesterday that we were talking about her arrival in Australia.
I know. It must have been is it only 2 years?
Yeah, I think it is.
It's only 2 years. It was sort of a valedictory speech at the National Press Club yesterday. She's about to head off. She was asked things from, what do you reckon of your cousin, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s appointment to the Department of Health, the anti-vaccinator man. And she said, Bobby Kennedy, I've known him for a long time, just wait and see. The other thing about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that I liked is that he's Department of Health and he appeared in a photo shoot, did you see, on Trump's plane eating McDonald's? Anyway, I'm digressing.
After committing to cleaning up the American diet and all of this, that's a great look, isn't it?
Yeah. She was asked about whether Australia should trust the US with sensitive information, particularly after pro-Russian politician Tulsi Gabbard was picked as Director of National Intelligence. Her response, and I quote, "Let's just calm down and see what happens." She also pointed out that all these people need to get confirmed. She was very positive about Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong. She said she's among the most impressive leaders on the world stage and is redefining Australia's role in the region.
June 2022, she took the job. So yeah, 2-year term. Feels like it's flown by. The share, away from politics. Now, though, there is a political element to this, isn't there? The share price of Resolute Mining tumbled 5.5% yesterday after the miner agreed to pay $160 million to the Mali government, which has detained CEO Terence Holohan and 2 other executives.
That's right. It's about 250 million Australian dollars. Half will be paid now, half will be paid later. In a statement to the ASX yesterday, Resolute, which of course is a gold miner, said all outstanding claims by the Malian government related to tax, customer levies, maintenance, and management of offshore accounts are now settled. It also talked about a framework for further detailed discussion regarding the long-term future of the operations in Mali. I'm not quite clear what that means. The Mali government has certainly been pushing to take a 30% stake in mining companies in that country. The ruling junta, we had this discussion yesterday. Did we decide it was junta or junta?
It was on the weekend edition. And you know what? I think we got so caught up in a whole bunch of other things that we never actually landed on an answer. And it means no one has actually Googled it between then and now. So we're in the same position as we were 36 hours ago.
I'm going to go Y, like Y, rather than a J. It's Junta. But anyway, the ruling junta came to power in 2021. They've been using ransom-style techniques to force mining companies to renegotiate contracts. There's a few Canadian gold miners, for example, who have paid out ransoms. At the moment, though, the focus for the company, of course, is working on the release of the 3 executives, including the CEO, Terence Holohan.
The big 2 supermarkets, Woolies and Coles, are having their say at a public hearing into the sector, Sean.
Yes, of course, they're facing allegations of sham discounts from the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. What they will say over the next week or so is that the period examined by the ACCC was particularly volatile. It was post-COVID-19. They'll also claim that the competition watchdog misunderstands how discounting actually works. Yesterday, the Woolies CEO, Amanda Bardwell, was in the hot seat. She said the industry is fiercely competitive, not just Woolies and Coles, but also Costco, Aldi, Chemist Warehouse. She also denied that the retailer is land banking. Now, that's the idea that a retailer would hold on to sites, even if they don't want to develop the site themselves. They just don't want to make sure a competitor develops the site. They just hold on to the land banking. Anyway, yesterday, Ms. Bardwell was very definitive that Woolies wasn't doing that.
Sean, the commodities sector saved the local share market yesterday with the big miners offsetting losses in other sectors.
So there's a bounce in iron ore prices that helped BHP, Fortescue Metals and Rio. There's also more confidence in uranium, aluminium and gold stocks, kind of for different reasons. I mean, for example, in aluminium, miner South 32 was up 6% after there was news of a potential tax change in China. The Trump trade stocks, tech, healthcare, financials, they struggled a bit. Now, over the weekend, Wall Street fell back as the enthusiasm for Trump trade stocks diminished. That's all about fears of higher interest rates for longer. By the end of the day, yesterday, the S&P ASX 200 closed up 0.2% to 9,300 points. In corporate news, Life 360 co-founder Chris Holes, he sold 1.2% of the total outstanding shares in that company. The reason, to diversify his financial wealth. He has plenty of wealth. That sale will net him about, well, not net him, but gross him about $36 million. Of course, investors don't like it when founders start selling shares. So its share price, Life 360 share price, fell more than 6% yesterday. Also worth a mention, bond markets, Michael, the enthusiasm for a February rate cut is diminishing by the day. Bond markets now pricing in a 50% chance of a rate cut in April, 100% chance by July next year.
Can I just rewind slightly, Sean? Because about, a minute and a half ago you said something, and I've listened to the rest of what you said, but I've been stuck on a point that you made earlier about the bounce in iron ore prices helping BHP and Fortescue and Rio. Why? Why did the price of iron ore bounce? Because it was heading in the other direction late last week.
Ah, yes. Well, it went back above $100 an ounce yesterday. There was some Chinese steel production data came out, and the numbers were up 6%. Production was up 6%, but it was 82 million tons in October. Steel production, 82 million tons.
That's a lot.
I mean, it's still below the 5-year average, but it's rising, and so that's kind of what the enthusiasm was about. But 82 million tons in 1 month.
Yeah, but I've just delivered my insight into that, didn't I? Just with my 3-word comment, that's a lot. Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Thanks for your contribution.
Anytime, that's what I'm here for.
So steel production is up. There's also some signs of life in the Chinese housing sector, according to the Commonwealth Bank. New home prices for 70 cities fell for the 17th consecutive month last month, but the pace of contraction has lessened. So according to our friend Vivek at Commonwealth Bank, that's actually good news. 17 consecutive months of falling, pace of contraction lessened. Are you going to say something, Michael? I'm looking at you. No?
No, I wasn't. I was about to ask you about it, but I'm just like, you know what? I've already put my foot in my mouth with my that's a lot comment. I'm just going to let you go.
Oil remains under pressure. The International Energy Agency forecasts global oil supply will exceed demand by more than 1 million barrels per day next year. And the Aussie dollar is up a bit, 64.6 US cents. That's more about that Trump trade. Little people, well, I wouldn't say disliking the US dollar. That's overstating it, but just not quite as confident about the US dollar.
I mentioned this story at the top of the show. Sean, broadcaster Alan Jones was yesterday arrested over allegations of indecent assault and sexual touching between 2001 and 2019.
The 83-year-old was taken away in an unmarked police car and charged with 24 offences against 8 victims, including 11 counts of aggravated indecent assault. Police carried out a search warrant on his unit at Circular Quay in Sydney. The Sydney Morning Herald has previously published a lengthy investigation detailing multiple allegations of indecent assault. Several men accused him of preying on them while he held positions of power as a teacher and a broadcaster. He has previously denied any wrongdoing. New South Wales Police Commissioner Karen Webb said detectives had been working on the case for months and it was complex and protracted. Now, the former 2GB breakfast show host reigned for 35 years. He won 226 ratings survey. He had enormous power within New South Wales and federal politics. Yesterday, he was taken away in a police car.
Turning to international news now, Sean, and US President Joe Biden has authorised Ukraine to launch limited strikes into Russia using US-made long-range missiles in really what is a big policy shift before the end of his White House term in January.
Yeah, it sure is. The Financial Times is reporting that the move comes in response to the deployment of thousands of North Korean troops to support Russia in its war against Ukraine, and after a barrage of new strikes by Moscow and Ukrainian cities at the weekend. Today, Michael, is the 1,000th day of Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now, the US-made long-range missiles are likely to be first used by Ukraine to target Russian and North Korean forces in the Kursk region of Russia. Mr. Biden has allowed Ukraine to use what they call HIMARS, the American High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, to strike targets inside Russia, but he's resisted allowing Kyiv to launch strikes within Russia using US-made long-range missiles known as the Army Tactical Missile System. The fear has been that would escalate tensions with Moscow. Anyway, he's allowing it now.
Another one that I mentioned at the top of the show, which I'm finding this is a fascinating story, Sean. Rolls-Royce is in early stage talks with potential commercial customers for its planned micro-nuclear reactor, a technology that it hopes will also provide power for space missions.
This has got Michael Thompson written all over it. It is a great story. So a director at Rolls-Royce told the Financial Times that the company is exploring opportunities to deploy the reactor across data centres, mining and remote communities. Rolls-Royce, better known for their aircraft engines, I would say, also their cars of years ago, they want to capitalise on its nuclear expertise, the internal nuclear expertise, and with global interest in small reactors growing quickly, the company believes there's a business case for micro reactors for both terrestrial, there's a word I can't say it, for both terrestrial and space applications. Michael,
I'm writing. I'm putting it on the list along with preliminary. Terrestrial. Preliminary.
Yeah, good.
Please go on. Let's see how you go.
So compared with small modular reactors, which we know a lot about in this country, they're seeing a lot of demand for those small modular reactors from groups like Google to deliver low-carbon electricity for data centres. Micro-nuclear reactors use different technologies and have a much smaller power output. Their compact size also makes them transportable. Very, very important. Rolls-Royce began work on the technology for a micro-reactor 3.5 years ago. It joined forces with the UK Space Agency in 2021 to study how nuclear power could be used as part of space exploration. They're ramping up those efforts.
You mentioned Rolls-Royce cars there, Sean.
Yes.
And there's really, you're right, like you said that years ago, And I thought, no, there's still plenty of Rolls Royce around, but there's really not that many sold. So I was just looking up some stats while you were talking, and I mean, these stats are probably 18 months old, but there was, I think, 60 sold in 1 year.
In Australia?
In Australia.
Yeah. I know it's in the dozens. Yeah, it's not many.
Yeah. You still get a buzz, don't you, whenever you see one?
Oh, yeah, totally.
And you always just kind of peer behind the steering wheel to see who's there, like in the hope that it's going to be one of those people that are renowned for driving, like it's going to be John Laws, or it's going to be Kyle Sandilands, or one of those kind of ones. And typically it's not, which is always a bit of a downer.
You never know.
Also, not particularly hopeful. Anyway, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. You're speaking today with Elizabeth Broderick. And keep an eye on your playlist as well, because at around about midday today, there is a new episode of Ask Fear and Greed, where we answer listener questions. And head along to fearandgreed.com.au and sign up for the free weekly newsletter, which comes out tomorrow. So there's a little bit on the to-do list. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you very much, Michael.
It's Tuesday, the 19th of November, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast, and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.